Legend tales of a place where the booze flows freely and the stories are always entertaining. If you are bold enough to seek out such a place, head 13 miles down the Tuscan Highway to a tiny blues joint known as the Townsmith Tavern. Once there, enjoy the ride. Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to a UA production of Beer, Blues, and Bowl.
Excuse me, you can't say that. You're gonna lose your family-friendly rating. You're gonna corrupt the kids.
BS! A podcast that invites you to grab a cool beverage, pull up a seat, and enjoy time with friends. And here are your hosts, Howard Blues and the Mark Kidder.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Beer, Blues, and BS. I am your host, Howard Blues, here, well, as always, with my co-host, the man, the myth, the legend, the Mark Kidder. Kidder, how you doing tonight?
Oh, well, hello, and thank you for that lovely introduction. I am doing just well. Fantastic. Well, I shouldn't say fantastic. I'm not as good as what it could be right now, and obvious reasons. Tired. I should be hungover. I'm sleep-deprived hungover and upset. But you know what? I'm okay. And the reason that, I'm feeling that way is, of course, last night. Well, let's just start yesterday in general. First of all, your Colorado Avalanche ended up in an overtime situation against the Las Vegas Golden Knights and lost in overtime. So that's kind of set the stage for the afternoon. And then, well, your University of North Dakota Fighting Sioux in the bid for the Frozen Four against University of Minnesota Duluth. Well, let's just say that thing started at 6:30 and we weren't done until almost midnight. Longest hockey game anyway in NCAA tournament history. 5 overtimes, and unfortunately your Fighting Sioux not the winner last night. However, when you look at it in the game overall, phenomenal game. We as in the Fighting Sioux could have lost earlier in the first overtime. That goal was disallowed due to an offside issue, and then, well, it just continued on and on and on from there. And of course, as you know, Howard, that the rules for the NCAA tournament are much like the NHL playoff rules, where you keep playing until somebody scores. There's no shootouts. There's no 3-on-3 unless there's penalties. There's nothing extra. It's 5-on-5 hockey until somebody scores. And, well, shoot, I think we were rolling up into the 11:40 time frame, Central Time or something like that last night. And, yeah. So, my bad. It was 12:43 a.m. when that happened, so I was an hour off.
I was just looking at that to correct you, because I know when I called it quits and went to bed. And yeah,
and then when I sent a text, that's how I confirmed what time it was.
I was just pulling up my text just to see that. Yeah.
So there's next year, if people stay with the program for another year, definitely another top contender. I don't know if it was something. You know what? I don't even feel that the team went in there with the expectation of winning. You know what I mean? Like they played to win, and they were there for the most part and do a great job. It's just that it ended up being that point in time where Minnesota Duluth got a lucky break. They ended up getting the goal in the back of the puck in the back of the net, creating that goal, and making it 3-2 in the overtime. And unfortunately, well, we have to wait another few months until the program gets rolling again. But of course, we have your Colorado Avalanche to look forward to. Continue kicking ass this year, and hopefully they'll do pretty well here in the playoffs as we continue fighting for first place in the what is it now, the Western Division? I know there's an Eastern Division. I think it's East and West and Canadian. I don't know, but we'll see. I'm hoping for the best.
Yeah. Well, and you at least were watching the game. I wasn't watching the game. So I was living vicariously through your text messages, and I'd already had a long day. Junior, he's teething. The kid is hasn't ever stopped teething. Since month 3, he's been teething. I mean, the kid's just turned 1 at the beginning of March, and the kid, he's got, I think it's 10 teeth, but
it's fangs, man, fangs.
Oh, well, he's working on molars right now, but the last few times that he's kind of had these teething sessions, he develops a fever. So he was sick, started kind of Friday, just not feeling well, feverish. So we had him Friday. Saturday, I had him all day. I don't think he was either sleeping on me or in his high chair eating the entire day. But the time that he was in his high chair eating was about the only time he wasn't being held by me. He was just that clingy, So needless to say, it was kind of a long day of doing nothing because of that. And then we were going to record, and so my wife put him to bed. I came down here at 10 o'clock and had my drink. Had my drink ready. Was sitting here, and you even texted at one point, "Oh, we're going overtime." Oh, okay. In fact, I actually was eating dinner at the same time because I had to hold him the whole time. I didn't get dinner until 10 o'clock. I let my wife eat because she came home from work. So I was eating dinner, trying to get me done in time for the game and for us to record. And yeah, you sent in that first text in the overtime, oh, Sioux lost. I'm like, oh. They're like, oh, it's offsides. Yep. I'm like, yay. Yep. But because I wasn't watching the game, I was sitting here waiting and waiting.
And you're still here.
I'm still here, but I think it was around 12:30, 12:40 that through text, we said, we'll record tomorrow. I got to go to bed. 6:30 is going to be here, and I'm going to have Junior again. And luckily his fever broke. He's doing well, but he was really tired and cranky today. So, but did well. We ran a couple of errands. He survived. We also we went out to the ranch. I got called out there for a project. I would have invited you, Kidder. I know how much you love going out to the ranch. I do. This was a non-heavy machinery related project. So,
all right, fine. Well, there's always another time.
Yeah. No. It was kind of interesting because I got the call about, hey, what you doing? Nothing. Calvin and I didn't have any plans. And my dad's like, well, we have a project where we need a third person. Can you come out? And I'm like, yeah, sure. I'll be out early this afternoon. Fine. I get out there and my dad's, sees me walk in. He's like, so, did your wife come with you? I'm like, no. It's like, we might have an issue. Because my mom isn't in town. She's actually down in Aberdeen, South Dakota. My aunt, this past week, tripped while walking down the sidewalk and broke her knee.
That's had not to have, a good day.
Yeah, had to have surgery, and she lives alone. So my mom's down there helping her out, helping her with the recovery, things like that. So there was nobody to hold Junior.
Oh boy.
So yeah, and my dad was a little worried, but I had thought ahead. And I had brought his little Jeep Wrangler,
Ah, yes.
and I'm like, we'll just set him in that. I said he'll be happy to sit here and supervise. And that, sure enough, we set him in there. We put up my parents a couple of years ago. They tore apart a old railroad box car, and so they put up the track. And one of the basically, my dad made a door out of some of the wood from it, but made kind of their own sliding door, much like the one behind you to your laundry room there that I can see
Ah,
in your camera.
yes.
But yeah, out of this old box car. And they need some help lifting this heavy rail up and putting it in. And
So you had to do some heavy lifting.
yeah. But it took less than 15 minutes. My dad actually, for once, was actually apologetic of like, man, I'm sorry we had you drive out here because you spent more time driving out here and back than you will actually here helping us. I'm like, it's all right.
Kind of like those sorts of projects. All right, work's done. So let's crack into some beer, huh?
Well, him and my brother had a few more projects, but I brought Calvin back home, and he was due for a nap, but he didn't get one right away because our neighbors they've hired somebody to do some lawn mowing. Have you noticed, Kidder, the grass around here really is not in need of mowing yet?
You know, it's really funny that you say that. Yeah, it is pretty brown, pretty dead, but it is, or at least today was a good opportunity to get the dethatcher out and really collect some of that crap that's in your lawn, and then you gotta mow it off the top. So I can only guess, as a logical human being, that's what they were doing, because I heard some lawnmowers this afternoon in my neighborhood as well. So I can only guess that's what they were doing. I'm not assuming, because I know the general I don't want to say stupidity, because not necessarily stupid, but I mean the general conundrum that would be trying to figure out what they're actually doing. I'll just leave it at that for now.
Yeah. I don't know that they were actually mowing, but I don't know that they were scraping stuff up. I don't really know. They basically made like 10 passes over the same area. But the thing that got to me is just, and I took a photo of this to share with you.
Well, this should be good.
But it's the sheer amount of dust and dirt coming off of this lawnmower.
Now look at that thing.
Yeah. I mean,
I would say that they're trying to soak up the or suck up the leaves and whatnot from or the pine needles from that tree, but it doesn't even look like a pine tree of some kind.
yeah. I don't know what they were trying to do, but yeah, the sheer amount of dust. And I couldn't help but think, as again, I was trying to put Junior down for a nap, and just the sound of this guy going back and forth was keeping him awake. But just seeing this cloud of dust, I couldn't help but think, if Kidder was here, this would just kill him with his allergies.
Literally, it's a definite possibility. Even looking at that, photo, I'm feeling the tingling right here in the center of my brain, where my sinuses are starting to just tingle a little bit. So it's going to be another wonderful, dry, blowy, nasty year. So God help me for when I need to go mow my lawn.
Yeah. Well, Kidder, normally this is the part of the show where I'd ask you, what's on tap?
Well, I mean, you can still ask me, but as we know from last night's and yesterday's beatdown of emotion, shall we say, I guess I'm emotionally hungover from yesterday. So even though I'm wearing my Metallica whiskey in the jar shirt, the only whiskey here would have been right in this container, but there's none in there anymore. So there's that. Also have talking about the world's saddest violin effect makes it even worse. Absolute garbage. And then I have a couple other alcohol bottles on display down here. So that's about all I have for that. And at this point, I don't even feel like going up and getting a beer or a glass of whiskey. And I mean, that's pretty sad considering that's like our thing. Are we losing it already?
And I will admit, I had planned on at some point heading to a liquor store, picking up some different beer, so that it's like, oh, I could have some different stuff for the show, And after being up as late as I was, because even then, as I said, I called it a night around 12:40. It was still like 1 a.m. before I went, and then sure enough, my wife brings me Junior at like 6:30 and goes, "I know you didn't get much sleep, but I have to go to work, so here you go." So I've had just a pounding headache all day, and so I'm I'm just having some good old H2O.
Easy there, water boy. Calm down.
Yeah. Hey, do you remember the last time that you and I were in the speakeasy? I know it's been a couple of years now.
Has it been that long?
It has been. Yeah.
It would have been like June of 18 then?
Yeah. Well, it was before you guys were married.
Must have been about 2018 then.
Yeah.
I partially remember.
I because, and we've discussed this before, I don't do well loud environments. I don't hear whatsoever. But the last time we were there, I wasn't drinking at that point, and you were placing orders with, I don't want to say waiter because he's not really a waiter, but whoever came around to get drink orders, and you were placing, and for me, I remember you pointing over, like, oh, and he'll have a blue dolphin.
Yes, and I do remember.
And the guy gave me the most incredulous look, like, who comes to a speakeasy and gets water? And I just looked at him.
I happen to feel that he did not understand like the input. Like, here's this piece of information coming into my brain, and it's not registering up here. And so then he looked at you like, what are you trying to order here?
Well, okay, because truthfully, if it was me, I would have just asked for water. You got all fancy on him, but he gave me that look of that, and I remember I just said, "Yeah, I'm the designated driver," and you could just see it click, and he's like, "Oh, okay." Which
ding, ding, ding.
I wasn't actually the designated driver at that point, but it's a great way to.
It was a good cover up while it was there.
Yeah. I didn't
and
really.
Next time I'll have to ask for a Royale with cheese, and we'll see what happens.
What do you think this is? Canada?
Easy now, because I think Samuel L. is going to have something to say about that.
Yeah, no, yeah. To me, it was just one of those. I could have really laid into him and told him, some whole long story about why I wasn't drinking at the time, but I don't think he really needed to know that. So, but yeah, I was on a non-drinking kick at that particular time period.
I mean, it's all good. We somehow survived. It was tremendous and absolutely insane, but we somehow made it through. We'll have to go back because that is one of the only places in town that can make an old fashioned correctly. So, for those of our friends joining us for this episode of the Triple B, if you want a decent old fashioned, I could say two things. I'm going to go with the safe one. Go to this good place. It's 510.2. And if you don't know what it is or where it is, well, I guess then the old phrase goes, if you have to ask, you can't afford it. So we'll just leave it at that. Go get an old fashioned, the traditional tasty beverage at 510.2. There you go.
So, Kidder, I know we already kind of covered, the Sioux hockey game, but I have to tell you about what I was doing while I was waiting to kind of bring it back, because you'll get a kick out of
basket weaving.
No, because I couldn't watch the game because I didn't have cable. I was watching, as I sat here and ate and waited for you, I was watching on YouTube. You can find all of these where people have taken and made like a compilation of hockey clips, usually themed around something like, bad calls or line brawls or just different things like that. And I was watching one, and it was like drama at the end of the game. And it had one of the best pieces of bad commentary ever. So,
and what was this commentary?
Well, yeah. So this was, I want to say it was around 2000, because of course there was no dates on this clip, but late 90s, 2000s. And it was the Coyotes and the Anaheim Ducks were the teams playing. And of course, it was one of those where the commentators were talking about something else. Something happened, a little scrum. They didn't see what caused it, so they were, of course, putting their guesses to it, and then they finally get the replay of it. And the commentator, you could tell that he had seen just enough professional wrestling that he didn't understand it.
Oh, gosh.
But that he thought he could use it in context to like connect him to the fans. So in the clip, the goalie, I believe it was the Ducks goalie. Unfortunately, the angle they showed was like sky cam, so tough to tell. Took offense at a opposing team's player, and as he skated by, reached back, grabbed him kind of by the neck, and pulled him down to the ice. Okay, what you would probably put as like a neck breaker if you were going for an actual wrestling hole, move. But this commentator, he's like, "Oh my gosh, well, he just got him with the reverse double chicken wing. My God, it's like Bam Bam Bigelow off the top rope. Jim Duggan."
Okay, let's just throw out some things and see if they actually work. Come on.
That was my favorite thing. After the Bam Bam on the high rope, just to bring up Hacksaw Jim Duggan. It's like, that guy hasn't wrestled in ages, I know who it is, but it's like,
well, I mean, even Bam Bam Bigelow. I mean, didn't Hacksaw wrestle after Bam Bam? I mean,
other way. So Hacksaw would have been mostly 80s, kind of late 70s, 80s, a little bit in the 90s. He was actually, here's a fun one, Hacksaw Jim Duggan was actually the first winner of the Royal Rumble. Ooh, back before it gave you a title shot at Mania. Yeah. Bam Bam comes on the scene early 90s. So he's kind of in the 92, 93, 94, 95 range. That's when he comes. So
I guess I was just thinking of all the times that Hacksaw kept making his appearance over and over and over at various events, and whether it was, a pay-per-view or Raw or, of course, then later the Legends House from already a few years ago, and stuff like that. So I stand corrected.
But it was just this like great example of a commentator who knew just enough that he felt like so confident in that reference, and like all people are going to get this. I'm making a professional wrestling reference to this hockey fight, which is the first time and only time I think I have ever seen or heard a hockey fight described in terms of professional wrestling. So
yeah, well, now we'll have to let our listeners and viewers go and scour the internets and see what the bowels of the internet can, shall we say, scoop up. Because the old throwback as well to WWE Raw 2, the video game. The big thing was, you could sneak into the locker room and try and steal things from the other wrestlers, if you remember that one. And of course, when the animation was so crappy, I don't want to say pixelated because it was just crappy, that when you would come out of there and you'd be like a shoebox, and your guy is doing, sorry, there's no fingers, so you're like doing this in a shoebox in the corner off to the side, and then you come up with nothing. Your dude's like, and so, and number one, if you're going to steal something, I don't know why, if you don't find something to steal, that you would then back off and go walking out of the room like that. That was number one. But number two, it looked like you were scooping up the dirt. So that was the big joke between all of us, is that I'm going to go into the locker room, man. I'm going to see if I can scoop up the dirt. Look at him. Look at him. Look at him. He's over there just scooping up the dirt. Because he'd be sitting there just it's just stupid. Oh, you found an old pair of socks. Wow, it unlocks Rikishi's red and orange thong. Awesome. Just what I wanted.
It just goes to show that video games have gotten so much better in a lot of respects. So,
I'd say in some they have, and in some they haven't, where the realistic appearance of both the stage, the set, and the wrestlers themselves, yes, it has come a long way. I think that they end up getting kind of squished between, okay, do we make it high resolution so they look good, or do we go over here and then we make the storyline and the capabilities of the game a lot better? And so I think they've been struggling a lot with that back and forth, because remember the older games, you had the creator wrestler with so many different options, and then the hidden, wrestler 32 under there is Booker T, and 38 is Kurt Angle. If you put them all together, then you get the move set and that wrestler and whatnot. And I'm sure that you remember that. But when you look at the GM mode, the become a superstar and enter the WWE in the draft and things, or even before the draft was a thing, the Road to WrestleMania version within the game. So after you can win the Rumble, then you're on the road to WrestleMania. And these extra little things in there, feuds you could have with the certain superstars that mirror different storylines that occurred on TV. So you have the lines from the wrestlers, things like that. There's all this stuff that's really cool, and then, well, we can't add all that in because now we have a roster of 87 people. So you get the most wrestlers ever and 12 arenas.
Yeah. No, I get that. And and then you had like this year's failure with 2020 WWE 2020, where they had lost longtime developer who made all of these games. And so I don't know if you watched any of the glitch videos from YouTube of that, but oof.
No, I didn't end up seeing any, but it was 2K, right? Because it was always 2K 18 and 19, 20.
Yeah, my brain was struggling to remember the 2K part. I'm like, I know it wasn't 2020, but what was it? What was it? So yeah, the 2K20. Some of just the glitches and animations and such were just terrible. Some of the podcasts I listen to, and they aren't really even video game people, but they were seeing some of these videos of the glitches and the animations and such, and they're like, "Don't go buy this game." Not that I play these games to begin with, but don't go buy this game. So,
is it similar to the Cyberpunk 2049? Or I can't even remember what the full title is. The Cyberpunk game, where everybody was super excited for it to come out, and then it finally makes it onto the market, and everybody sees what a flaming dumpster that it actually was. Something like that.
it's not quite. The Cyberpunk, was it 2077?
Maybe that's what it is.
Yeah.
In the future.
That one I think suffered more for there just being a lot of hype into it and such a demand that they raced to get it out. And so it wasn't perfectly polished. And we've kind of hit this point with sandbox games that it's a lot of work to actually create them and to make them and to develop. And you have some companies that have been doing it now for so long and have perfected it so well that you just get those comparisons too, you know. And in fact, I saw a video it was a comparison of Cyberpunk to GTA 5,
2077. I checked with the fact checkers, and it is Cyberpunk 2077.
Right. Anyway, but yeah, I watched a YouTube video where it was a comparison between the things you could do in GTA 5, which is net by now. Like GTA 5 is 7-8 years old. Like it's been out for quite a while. And here, this Cyberpunk 2077, and you know, there were things that you can't do in that, but you could do in GTA 5, and it just goes to show, you know, these sandbox games have gone so, you know, have gotten to be so good and so many options that it's hard to come out with the new one because it's going to take you years of development to kind of get to this level, especially if you haven't been doing it. I think with WWE 2K20, the fact that they lost their long-term developer and they're just so used to every year having a video game, you know, you're hiring somebody and going, here, make this, you know, thing that these guys had years of and could just take their own code and go, okay, we're going to tweak this, we'll tweak that, but basically build off that same code every year to now all of a sudden like start from, you know, scratch, do it in a year. You know, there was no way anybody was going to survive that. So
I do have to say, going back to the old school SmackDown PlayStation video games, I still feel that those, like SmackDown, Here Comes the Pain, I think that was the first one. Like those were and are still some of the best wrestling games that there were, because we played the crap out of them back then, and they weren't terrible. We tried playing WWF No Mercy on the 64. That was also a good game that we played a lot of. And then as you know, time went on, it was, oh, let's get the new WWE whatever game and this, and I remember WrestleMania. There were a couple WrestleMania games that were crap. WWE Raw 2. I think I played the most time on that game, aside from the SmackDown game and PlayStation. But that was an Xbox original game. That was a lot of fun, creating the different wrestlers and then fast forward. I can't remember. SmackDown versus Raw, I think, is the one that you and I played a lot back in like the 2005 to 9 ish range, maybe 2010, because they were doing the SmackDown versus Raw series until they ended up switching to the 2K lineup. I think they were with the Take-Two Games. I think that's the studio that makes those, but I don't know. I'm kind of over it. I haven't picked up any of the games since, well, let's see. I got 2K 316 because that was the Stone Cold edition. And then I think it was 2K17. No, it couldn't have been 17. I think it was 2K15 was the CM Punk edition, and then 16 was the Stone Cold edition, if I remember correctly.
That sounds about right. I have a couple more, but I picked up some like at GameStop after they were several years old, and you could get them for like $2.
Mm-hmm. Or also the Xbox Live or Microsoft / Xbox had them as the games with gold. So I have one of the newer ones for free, and that's fine. One of the John Cena ones, I think that was 18 or 19, somewhere in there. 18.
Truthfully, I was more picking them up, and this will be a good transition, I think, into kind of our next topic. But I was picking them up more for predictions. So
you had the current roster, right?
Yeah, exactly. I could use less proxies. So yeah,
Bill proxy.
Kidder and I have it in my notes, but I'm not going to take the time to look it up. But as we said, kind of last episode, we get together every month to watch the pay-per-view, and several years ago, we started just for kicks, starting to we would do predictions on the pay-per-view. So we list out the matches. Everybody would put down their predictions of who they thought were going to win each match, and we have a winner every time. And for a while with that, I was taking, and this is back when I had more time, but I would simulate the card because you could do that in the video games, and I would just usually put it on in the background while I was grading papers or such back in my teaching days, and I could just let it run through the pay-per-view, and I would jot down some of their crazy predictions on things, which were sometimes pretty good. And I was doing that up until the roster got so far ahead that it's like, I don't have anybody to be this guy. So, but I haven't done that in years where we did the video game.
Yeah, and we don't even have enough time when you drop by for me to put it on and go through it. But of course, probably quarter of the people that are on the roster now aren't in the video game. But I want to say we've been doing predictions since about 2012. That's about when we started doing it, unless it was 2011 before I came back to Izzo.
Yeah. Well, and it's one of those where I'm the statistician of the group in that sense. So I keep all of the stat sheets. We have them in an Excel file. And I keep promising one of these days to make a master sheet that would tell us like our stats per season and pay-per-view and such. I just, again, can never find the time to sit and do all of that Excel work. One of these days. I keep always trying to get it set up because we always kind of do WrestleMania as the big season finale. So one of these times I'd like to just kick it off where, hey, beginning of the season, we're good to go. But
Well,
finding the
we are
times.
coming to that point because Mania is 2 days again this year, and fans in attendance and whatnot. So there is that possibility of the 2 days getting together. I think it's only supposed to be like 4 hours each day instead of 10 hours running from start to finish. So maybe that's better, maybe not. I guess we'll kind of see. Hopefully it'll be better than last year, because I just was bored with last year, except for Kevin Owens' match where he jumped off the giant WrestleMania sign, or I guess it was part of the sign. It was part of the set, the LED wall. But then also with the Undertaker's last WrestleMania, last ride cinematic match, which of course featured Metallica and the song "Now That We're Dead" from the wonderful last album, which came out in 2016, called Hardwired to Self-Destruct. Still waiting on some new Metallica music, but roundabout wave going back to Fastlane last weekend. Came down and we checked that out. Overall, not a terrible pay-per-view. I don't really feel that it's specifically necessary, because it locked in WrestleMania. It didn't, because on this past week's Friday night SmackDown, the main event that was set already for WrestleMania with Roman Reigns and Edge for the Universal Championship is now a triple threat match with Daniel Bryan. So I kind of like the original idea that was pitched during SmackDown from Danny Bryan. It's like, look, there's 2 nights of WrestleMania. How about first night? It's take your pick of whether it's Roman Reigns and Daniel Bryan or Roman Reigns and Edge. And then the winner of that match goes on to night 2 to face, obviously, the other person, whether it's Edge or Daniel Bryan. I thought that would have been a pretty good idea. Nope, it's a triple threat match. And I was waiting for Theodore Long to holla, 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 holla out and go, you're going to face 1-on-1 with The Undertaker. That's really what I was waiting for. I know it's not going to happen because they already made that joke this year, so we got to wait a few more months until they can do that again. But it's not really necessary. That's my 2 cents with that.
I was going to say, because last week we were talking about Fastlane and giving a little bit of predictions and such, but we called that then. When we were talking about it, we said this is setting up a triple threat match. There would be a screwy finish, and I didn't even get to see the screwy finish. Unfortunately, Junior was not having it. So we had to bug out early.
I mean, we weren't really having it either. Let's be honest. I mean, it was just on. We already knew what was going to happen.
So I just wanted to say, though, but we called that one. We called the Sasha Banks, Bianca Belair, this is just going to set up their match with them feuding. Sure enough, so we had some pretty accurate predictions. Looking at the results sheet, the big surprise that everybody in our group predicted was that The Fiend would return. He did. I do call some reffing shenanigans on that match, though, because nowhere was
disqualification.
Correct. That's my thing.
A regular match. So outside interference, or the use of pyrotechnics as a weapon.
Yeah. So
I'm calling shenanigans. I get my point back. I had Orton.
You still didn't win.
Well, I know I didn't win, but I'm pretty sure I had Orton, right?
You did. Only one person chose Bliss in all of that.
Very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, so I also had Orton, so I would have gotten that point, and I still would have won. So
Listen here, you son of a bitch. I know it's rigged. That's why we need a legit statistician. I demand a recount. There's hanging chads. There's voter fraud. The Dominion voting machines are hacked. And I know you're in on that system. You
careful.
What?
We can't afford a Dominion lawsuit.
Oh, I mean the Dominion from the Beta Quadrant from Star Trek Deep Space Nine. The Dominion,
okay.
the Dominion are hacking your computer. We were talking Star Trek last week, right?
Yeah,
Listen,
we were.
And if the other people with the voting machines want to try and mess with us, we don't have any money anyway, so it costs you more to get the $20 out of my pocket than what it's worth. So there's that. Let's just lay that out.
Well, and let's face it, if they're actually hearing about this, thanks for listening and being a supporter of Beer Blues and BS.
We appreciate you.
Yeah. But no, overall, I mean, Fastlane was okay. It was what it
much
was.
Worse pay-per-views, I feel, in this past 6 months.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, I'd give it an average, probably a low B, high C rating. There were some good matches. I mean, that again, we always kind of mention that they have good talent, and I would say you saw some very good wrestling and some very good matches. It's a matter of just they don't matter. They don't, supposedly it's another stepping stone in the stories they're trying to tell to get to Mania, and that is what it is. I would much rather see them come up with a different concept for that show. I know you're trying to push those big matches, but I mean, it would be a great time to do something, especially you have talent that never gets on the pay-per-view because you have so many title matches. It would have been a great time to just let them build to something, have a number one contender match, have somebody, competing, for a spot on the card. It just something. And
we've talked about this before, but for me, earlier today, I watched Friday Night SmackDown. And so SmackDown is a 2-hour show, like we've discussed before. And is it worth the 2 hours at this point? I mean, But for me to watch SmackDown took about 8 minutes today. And is that the fastest? No, it isn't the fastest. But is it the slowest? No, it definitely isn't. I don't know, just not very vested in the product. I mean, I am and I'm not. It's very selective. Like if I see something interesting, yeah, I'll check it out.
I think it's a thing of you and I over the years have spent enough time on that product that you're hoping that it'll be good. It's not. I think I said this last time. It's not that I enjoy picking on the WWE or making fun of the WWE or just laying in on how bad the product is. It's more of that you keep watching hoping to see something good and that you can enjoy. And when you do find that, it's easy to sink your teeth into it. Bray Wyatt's run as the Fiend up and when it first started, when he was doing the Firefly Funhouse, it was good. It was interesting. I wasn't watching the weekly product, but boy, did I go out and find a video, compilation on YouTube that ran through all of the Firefly Funhouse, just because I wanted to see it, because hearing about it on the podcast, it's like, this is interesting. This sounds interesting. I want to see this. So trying to do that has been that. But overall, I thought Fastlane was good. We'll see what Mania brings and some of that build up as we go forward with that the season. So, Kidder, I know we've talked hockey in the earlier part of the show, and I don't want us to just be a wrestling podcast, but I thought this was interesting. It's something that I saw a lot on YouTube. I don't know if you saw anything on the Tim Peel controversy. For those in the audience who don't know, he is a referee in the NHL who got caught on a hot mic during the Predators Detroit game this last Tuesday, basically saying that he was hoping to give Nashville a penalty. He did it in a bit more colorful language than I would prefer to use on this show. But yeah, it was kind of mid-second period. He gets caught on a hot mic and has now lost his job over it. And I've seen it just kind of all over the airwaves. But Kidder, I don't know if you saw any of that or paying attention to
I just saw
story.
the title or the headline for it. I didn't actually look into it a whole lot. I just saw that he was fired for getting caught on the hot mic for, I should have given that guy a penalty or something along those lines. That's about all I saw.
Yeah, it was much more of a, I was looking for more. I wanted to give him an effing penalty. And, well, here, I can probably find the exact quote.
Here we go. Finding the quote on the thing that we call the internet. Should be good.
Well, I did watch like the video of it, and it's interesting because he was the mic'd up ref for the game, and they're cutting to commercial. So you know how a lot of times in the hockey games when they're like, "We'll be right back with more action," and they have like the scores, and such as they're going to commercial. And he came on, and the quote is, "It wasn't much, but I wanted to get a effing penalty against Nashville early in and that's where it cut off."
And they say that reffing isn't the problem.
Well, so this got me investigating because, I know we all of us who are sports fans like to blame the refs, like to think that they are biased. There's a particular referee in UND lore who got his own chant because everybody thought he was biased.
Shepherd.
Yeah. Again, we're try to keep it clean on this show, and so we can't finish that particular.
We try to, but I mean, it happens.
It does. Anyway, this got me thinking, have there been other NHL ref controversies? And so I actually spent a chunk of time this week trying to research if there'd ever been a controversy like this, if there'd ever been a ref who's been accused of bias or just calling a game against one side or the other. And surprisingly, not a lot of that reported in the NHL.
Which is good because you're on that top tier professional level of the sport of hockey. And so one would assume being at that level, you're held to that higher level of expectation, higher level of professionalism, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I've only found a few cases in it. There was Bruce Hood in 1984. There's the game between the Montreal Canadiens and the Quebec Nordiques, who we all know as the Colorado Avalanche of today.
Your Colorado Avalanche.
Yeah, this event would become known as the Good Friday Massacre. And basically, sometime I'll have to get into the whole story of it, but basically the teams ended up in an hour-long brawl at the end of the second period.
Sweet.
Yeah. And this was controversial mostly because the ref decided after an hour-long brawl to continue the game. Like he didn't end it. They had the hour-long brawl. They went for the period break. They came back at the third. They started rattling off what all the penalties were. Started a whole nother brawl.
Why not?
So you had that. You have some bad calls, but not a lot. One of the other ones was with, and I'm going to pronounce some of these names wrong. His name's Mick McGow. He had a couple that, again, mostly bad calls. Probably one of the more famous ones was Game 3 of the first round of the 2000 Stanley Cup playoffs. The Toronto Maple Leafs goaltender Curtis Joseph was upset after a goal was scored on him. It was the game-winning goal, and he felt that there was goaltender interference, and he went skating over to talk to Mick, right away, and was just a little too into it. Ends up falling on the ice and crashing into Mick, and he got a 10-minute game misconduct penalty for that. No suspension to follow, but he had that. Otherwise, the only other ref incident that I ever found in my research was a French-Canadian ref, Stefan Auger. There were some accusations that he was favoring one side over another. In 2010, the Vancouver Canucks forward Alexander Burrows argued that Auger was basically out to get him after Burrows received not one, not two, but 3 penalties in the third period of a game that they would go on to lose to the Nashville Predators. So there's that, but again, nothing that ever was proven or action was taken. But I just thought it was an interesting thing to look into, that you had this kind of clear controversy and it was blowing up every kind of hockey site that I followed. It's like, well, surely there's been controversies like this before. And it's like, not really. I mean, I had to dig to kind of find this stuff. And as I said, it's mostly accusations and not a lot of
no substantial proof there. Yeah. And I if I remember correctly, the headline that I saw is that he was also fired from the NHL.
Yeah. And the thing with it is Tim Peel was going to retire at the end of April anyway. So he's a ref on his way out. It'd be interesting to know, and it might take years before we ever hear his reasoning behind it, but I don't know. Did he have a vendetta against Nashville? What? But it's always interesting. I don't know about you. I always like these sorts of controversies. Like, it's something that I just like to dig into and find out more about. And
find the conspiracy.
It's not so much conspiracy. I don't know. I've always been fascinated by things that are controversial, and it's one of those things that kind of sucks me in to like a story, like in the news or such. When somebody goes, "This controversial pick," I'm like, "Oh, why is this pick controversial? Why is this video game controversial? Why is this movie controversial?" I'll look into it.
That's why you became a ref. Now I know.
Yeah, not quite, but it's just something I like to dig into. I like a good controversial story. It adds a little drama. It's interesting. And so yeah, I don't know. I've always been drawn to that stuff. But it was just kind of nice to see that hockey was not filled with a bunch of bad refs. There are some bad calls, surely. And I've watched enough hockey clip compilation videos, in the last few days to tell you there's been a lot of bad calls. But I can't honestly say that a lot of these calls were made, with malicious intent.
Fair enough. Since we're on the topic of hockey and getting ready to put a nice little tidy bow on this thing, I just wanted to share some breaking news with you.
Okay.
This is that the Frozen 4 has now officially been set for 2 weeks in Pittsburgh, if you will. And there are 4 teams in it. Of course, we know Minnesota Duluth heading to the Frozen 4 with the game, 2 games last night with the Fighting Sioux. But also, we knew that University of Massachusetts, or UMass, was also going. Today, the games were St. Cloud State and our friends at Boston College, and then Minnesota State Mankato versus the Golden Chokers. Yes, the Golden Gophers ended up winning yesterday over the University of Nebraska Omaha 7-2. Not a good day for the Mavericks yesterday, but today the Golden Chokers name lives up to it once again. Yes, we go another year without the Golden Chokers in the Frozen 4, and that means Minnesota State, St. Cloud State, Minnesota Duluth, and then UMass are your Frozen 4 contenders this year in Pittsburgh for the NCAA Frozen 4 tournament there. Also interesting that 3 of the 4 teams are from Minnesota, and on top of that, well, former WCHA rivals of your Fighting Sioux as well. Some in the NCHC, some still in the WCHA. So I think that is a very interesting thing to take a look at.
Yeah, my brother-in-law threatened to get my son a Minnesota Mankato hockey jersey.
So is he going to have to, is he going to kick his own ass then? Because, that's along those lines. Like, come on.
Well, he did go to Mankato.
I know some of us make mistakes. Some make bigger mistakes than others. It's all right. I get it.
Yeah. Anyway, that'll be. So I'm cheering for Mankato not to move on, just because I don't want to hear about it.
See, with this, it was the lesser of 2 evils, right? Because which bigger crap team do you want in the Frozen 4, right? Obviously, I would have chosen Nebraska Omaha. I've got a soft spot for Nebraska Omaha. Good. It's a nice arena. There's some good people there. A little soft spot. Plus, there was I think it was number 13. Didn't look at the roster like I should have, but there is a gentleman on the team with the name Weiss, of course, spelled the same name as the gentleman from Omaha. So one of the things that this year was kind of interesting about that. But a little extra clarification with the game earlier this evening with, again, the lesser of 2 evils, Minnesota State Mankato, the Mavericks, or the Golden Chokers of the University of Minnesota. How about this? The Mavs pick up the victory 4-0. How about that? In total choker fashion, the laying of the giant goose egg. So I'll take that.
I do laugh because what was it? It was last weekend was the UND NDSU football game.
Correct.
And everybody gets. Yeah, well, I was gonna say everybody gets fired up about that one around here, and it's interesting because when you and I were at UND, the rivalry wasn't happening.
When we started was the last of the rivalry for the Nickel Trophy, because I think we've talked about it before. But before the game, I was and my drumline mates were holding the Nickel Trophy, hoisting it and whatnot. I should put this down, I guess. But
yeah, and now where I work has the Nickel Trophy.
Yes, and that's okay.
Yeah.
So it came up, and it's always been like a big rivalry, whether it's just football or just the university versus university, because we all know that UND is the better of the two state institutions.
Totally.
But but yeah, it was a big thing of, UND's going to come up here and they think they have a chance at winning. Well, I mean, there was a legitimate chance of winning, just like any other game. Plus, you look at volleyball. How about that? UND has beat NDSU more than NDSU has won in the past decade. There's that.
Yeah. Well, volleyball unfortunately never gets the coverage that it truly deserves.
Right. And same thing with men's and women's basketball. I think there's that too.
Right. I would agree with that. Yeah. No. The reason I wanted to bring it up is, I had relatives who were getting all worked up about, well, UND can, and I still remember when kind of the break from the rivalry happened when UND finally jumped up to Division I football, and the first game between the two, and everybody's like, oh, it's going to be a good game. I'm like, no, it's not. NDSU was in the middle of their like epic, I forget how many championships they've won. But it was in the middle of that, and I'm just like, seriously? NDSU is in the middle of this great winning streak. We just moved up to Division I. I'm like, no, we're not winning it. Listen, I love UND, big fan. We're not gonna beat, the 4-time national champions when we have just moved up to Division I. It's not gonna happen,
Yeah, exactly.
But the point that I wanted to make is, you and I, while we were up there, that rivalry was for the most part dead. And so to me, the great UND rivalry has always been UND versus the Minnesota Gophers. That to me is the rivalry. That's the one I care about.
Rivalry, yes. I would say that rivalry is the Gophers.
Yeah. And that's still where I stand. So I don't get fired up about that football game. That's
Yep, just another game.
Just another game at that point.
Yeah.
I've never been a big UND football fan. I went to a couple of games freshman year, and they, at that point in Division II, I mean, they were just always blowouts. Every home game I was at was a blowout. And it's just like, this isn't really even fun to watch, when we're crushing people 40, 50 points to nothing. I was having more fun trying to, figure out if the guy in the cowboy boots and cowboy hat who ran around the field with that big flag was going to pass out, and be able to make it through the game.
Yeah, lots of running. Got his steps in, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, Kidder, I had one good story I wanted to just end this on because I thought you'd get a kick out of it.
Okay. You give us this good story. So
last weekend I mentioned was the birthday party for my wife and my brother-in-law, Aaron. And it was at Aaron and Rachel's place. And Aaron has been working on this sign to go on the front of their house. It's made out of low maintenance wood that he salvaged from when we redid my deck. He's got a little flower box with it, giant M for McCann on it. It looks really nice. And my father-in-law was going to help him hang it up. And my father-in-law thought, during this birthday party, there might be some downtime. I have, the screws to do this and, the bits. I don't need to bring a drill. Aaron's got one, but I'll bring the screws and the bits and we'll get it hung up during some downtime. So my father-in-law, because they were bringing a lot of stuff for the party, he didn't have room for all of his tool bags, so he just threw it all into like a Walmart plastic bag and brings it with. And he sets it out on the front step by where they're going to hang this so that it's there and ready for that. And at some point, we're enjoying the party festivities and such. My sister-in-law looks out the window and sees this little kid running up her way, kind of running, actually, I should say, down her driveway, carrying this plastic bag. And she goes, well, this is weird. What's going on? So, fast forward a little bit, or actually, I should say, rewind a little bit. Rachel was showing us, because they have a video doorbell. She was showing us this gentleman who had stopped by their place to put a flyer on their door and was trying to run, because age of COVID, you don't want to be on anybody's property or by their door too long. Run up to their door, put this flyer up and run. And they have some kind of odd stairs at the front of their place, kind of a combination of just a weird height and then the concrete sinking, so it's an even more height. This poor guy, okay, I'll get a little political, pulls a Biden and trips going up the stairs. Here's a little topical reference. And so that's what she was showing us, was this video. Yeah, she wanted to show us this guy falling up the stairs. Anyway, the flyer that he had, the Boy Scouts of America were doing their canned food drive. And for the next weekend, you were supposed to leave any canned goods out, by your door in a grocery bag so that they could come and collect them. So here it is. Some little Boy Scout sees a bag on Rachel Aaron's stairs, runs up, grabs it, runs off to the next house with it, stealing all of my father-in-law's tubs of screws and his drill bits and such. I can't wait to see that kid when he gets to his next Boy Scout meeting and he's handing in his bags of cans.
I mean, yeah. This is why parenting is important. Teach your kids to look at things before they grab, touch, pick up, whatever. Use their brain.
Well, I can't blame the kid because, again, because of COVID, it's this run, and they're thinking it's for this drive. But, I mean, it could have happened to anybody, you're carrying in your groceries from your car and you just set some down on your steps, and you just haven't made it back out to grab them yet. It's just great. So
that figures. That figures, right?
So it was a good story. I didn't get around to telling you because we ran so late last episode. I had to share this, how my father-in-law had his drill bits and tubs of screws stolen by the Boy Scouts of America. So,
well, I guess they're really the ones who got screwed in the end then.
It was a good try on that joke. It was good. Where's my sound effects thing?
Yeah, I make one of those and then just not ready for it.
Yeah, I know, because I should have followed up with
I see we figured out which button does what now.
You know what? It was a thumbs down. It had a good shot. All
right.
I took a chance. I got lucky. It's
you got to do that sometimes.
It's a great running gag to try and to use this. I keep forgetting I have it though. So
yeah, it happens.
Yeah.
Well,
it's all right.
I suppose now that we're running at the end, the official thing here is that we're still rolling with this for another week, and on top of that, how about that? The podcast. We got the Facebook page. It's Beer Blues and BS, the podcast, on Facebook. So, check it out, like it, send us a message. or you can just email him. That's howard@beerbluesbs.com. Or you can email me, kidder@beerbluesbs.com. It should be easy enough. You know what? Also, the KRDN Eyewitness News 8 24-hour weather channel. You could check that out as well. See your local forecast anytime. Of course, it helps if you're from North Dakota. And if you're not, it's fine too. Here's some coverage occasionally on there with the severe weather happening across the country. So we got a couple different things on there, and hopefully get some of the cool stuff in the show notes. Then you can check out some of the stuff that we're talking about here that we can't actually put into the video for fear of copyright violations. But, make sure you join us again, and don't want to put words in his mouth, but he's still Howard Blues, and I'm still the man, the myth, the legend, Mark Kidder. And make sure you join us again next time right here on the Triple B. That is Beer, Blues, and BS. Catch you on down the road.
You have been listening to a UA production of Beer, Blues, and BS. If you enjoyed the show, help others find out about it by rating the show or leaving a review at your podcast listening service of choice. Thanks for listening, and may your glass never be empty. UA Productions presents A Glimpse Behind the Curtain.
I suppose that's enough BSing before the BS. We might as well get it going so that I can go to bed. I don't even have a drink.
That's
you have a drink?
Yeah, it's just drinking water.
Water?
Yeah.
Worst episode ever.
I think we're gonna end up covering why, I'm drinking water and you probably don't have a drink. I mean, I think when you start talking about what happened last night and us trying to record last night,
yeah,
I think anybody would understand.
Why? Because we're too drunk, hungover from yesterday. I didn't drink at all yesterday either. I was too busy.
Yeah. See, and I did drink because I had my drink ready for when we did record. And then
it was a stiff drink.
Mm-hmm. And it was one of those. Yeah.
And another.
No, I only had the one.
Oh.
All I needed. But yeah.
Was it
anyway, we can
let's get into it.
I was gonna say we shouldn't be wasting all this good material now. Oh, I'm kicking off? Okay.
After you. Why not?
That's fine.